while they're getting photographed, I'll ask for the next panel to come in. Omri, where are you? You're coming with your panelist. And we're going to talk about the attacker's view of the cloud. How do attackers take a look at cloud security and evaluate it?
So my name is Omri Segev Moyal, and I'm the CEO of Profero, incident response company. And today's panel, we're going to speak about the attacker's perspective in the cloud. So everything you've been heard today was from the perspective of the defenders, from the perspective of the product development and some of the infrastructure, the government. And we are going to try as much as possible, as none of us are actual villain, at least I hope so. We're going to try to give the best perspective of the attackers and to try and help you in your organizations try and understand a bit better how their mindset is working. So first and foremost, Dima, please go ahead.
If somebody can, yeah. So my name is Dima. Good morning, everybody. I'm working in Google Cloud Security as a security architect, helping our customers use the cloud in a safe way and helping customers also if they get attacked. And my field of focus in the past, I think, year or so is around helping customers adopt AI securely as well and help, security teams leverage AI for their usage as well. So happy to be here.
Hi everyone, good morning. I'm Shira Shamban. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Solvo. Solvo is a cloud infrastructure security company. And as you can probably imagine, our customers are divided into two. The ones who want to make improvements to their security posture and the ones who've been hacked and now they need to make some fixes and they come for us to help them out to understand what their environment looks like and how can they fix those misconfigurations and block the attackers as soon as possible. So hopefully I'll be able to share a bit more about what we see today.
Thank you. My name is Michael Kolotov. I'm a cloud security expert, you can say, architect, DevSecOps, everything cloud basically. I've been helping organizations deal with cloud security issues and getting to the mindset of how we can leverage native security in the cloud, and also getting to the mindset of the attacker with the emphasis on how attackers see our cloud from the outside and how we can better protect it.
Amazing. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Yeah, one more. Working?
No, that's what
Thanks for joining the panel. So when thinking about it, if we're going to look back a couple of years ago, I'm as an attacker, only in the mindset, I had to infiltrate companies one by one. Had to go into this very daunting enterprise network with, hopefully, multi-layering and DMZ, etc. And more and more today, everybody is moving to the cloud or to hybrid network. And from the attacker perspective, I'm thinking, wow, instead of hacking thousands of customers one by one, or maybe doing some supply chain, I can hack one single vendor, and especially if we're speaking about the infrastructure and the path, and that's it, that's the holy grail. One goes for all. So, Dima, can you give us a bit of your perspective and how the cloud vendors are protecting themselves and how they can ensure the trust, and also from the attacker's perspective, what can be an holy grail for that?
Absolutely. So first of all, let's look at, at the attackers, what they're actually doing. If we break down attackers to different types, there's financially motivated attackers, and there's attackers in the field of espionage. I think that there is a lot of urgency as we saw governments are moving to the cloud and a lot of sensitive workloads are in the cloud. There is an urgency around the attackers, especially the highly sophisticated and funded ones, to find vulnerabilities in the cloud. But if we look at statistics, and I think everybody talked about it today, statistically, the breaches are happening due to misconfigurations, and this is what we're seeing eventually. So helping you with like misconfigurations is helping the attackers gain absolute footholds into cloud. Clouds are helping, like what we're doing to help our customers eventually is we're saying trust the cloud more by not trusting it. What we mean is we provide you tools such as managing your own encryption keys, such as you can shred the encryption key, and even the cloud provider does not have access to your data, just to give one example. So those are the kind of things. In terms of the clouds themselves, we have bug bounty programs, 10 million, I think last year we gave in bug bounty program. And also, you know, it's a multi-billion security organization. So this will not be the, you know, the easiest path in.
So thinking as an attacker, instead of going and doing some villain stuff, I can just sign in and start getting paid legally as a bug bounty, right?
Absolutely. So you can do bug bounty. We absolutely encourage it. And we work with bug bounties, and you know, we definitely all the time learn new things, and we definitely are all for.
Amazing. And this brings me to another topic, and thinking about it, it's almost equivalent to thinking about the total trust in cloud. And that's the point where, first and foremost, as an attacker, we are looking at the total enterprises in the world, and then let's try and find it in the cloud. And you mentioned misconfiguration as being, you know, very frequent. So maybe Shira, can you elaborate on that?
Yes, of course. So unfortunately, today in the cloud, people are leveraging misconfigurations more and more. If in the past, as you mentioned before, as an attacker, you would put all of your efforts, all of your eggs in one basket, target one organization. Today, you use the same efforts and you have access to hundreds or thousands of potential victims. And unfortunately, I don't want to say that in the cloud it's easier, it's just different. The scale is different and the potential is also bigger. And this is why when talking about bug bounties, it's very tricky if I want to get the bounty or if I want to run a ransom attack on 100 highly paying organizations. These misconfigurations in the cloud, if in the past we were used to detect on-prem misconfigurations, like opening ports to the internet, today we're talking about different kinds of misconfigurations, like identity misconfigurations. Identity and access management is the new perimeter in the cloud, so to speak, and organizations leverage the cloud. By the way, when we talk about cloud, we talk about the infrastructure, but we also talk about SaaS products that we always use to utilize our products. So when using these SaaS products, we connect them to our environment, we grant them certain kind of permissions, and if we misconfigure them, and I have to say, I'm sorry, most of the time we misconfigure them, we give admin permissions because I just wanted to check it out and see how it works and if it's easy to connect, and then I forget about it. Very often when I meet customers and I show them their environment, they're very surprised to see that they have a third party with admin privileges, and I ask them, why did you grant them with admin? Couldn't you just give them a read permission to that specific bucket? And they scratch their heads and they don't know what to say. So we all do this. We all misconfigure our environments, and it's up to us now to make sure we do that less, and definitely not with our crown jewels.
Amazing, interesting, and I think the scale factor is one of the most important. But other than the scale, I want to deep dive a bit more into some of the common mispractices and maybe how attackers are exploiting. So maybe, Michael, can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, sure thing. So a lot of time, mostly vendors are pushing us into fixing CVEs and looking into our Kubernetes systems and clusters and everything. But in reality, from an attacker's perspective, all I need to do is understand what services are public. So a lot of the times we see breaches from an open database server or an open EC2 or a compute server. So a lot of the time we need to get into the mindset of how attackers sees us from the outside, what ports we have open, what services we have open, if it's lambdas or cloud functions. Anything that can minimize our impact or exposure to the world need to be addressed first, and then we can make the attacker's life a bit more challenging. Well, not really, but hopefully a little bit more.
Amazing. And are you seeing a lot of common practices and tools, and maybe Dima can answer that with your magnitude and scale? Is there any repeating factor of type of tools and things that the attackers are using, things that we can defend against?
Absolutely. So first of all, we need to understand, and also about the first lecture about attackers login. Definitely. So first of all, we see a lot of attackers trying to develop kind of living off the land and using the cloud native tools, which are very hard to defend. There is also, security researchers, and there is also a lot of free, GitHub projects which are being used and leveraged all the time. I think that tool-centric detections are a challenge in the cloud, and you need to look also at anomaly-based detection. If somebody is logging at the wrong hours, monitoring for non-human identities and tying them to human identities, so who generated which service account, and are they accessing APIs that they have never accessed before? I think those are the things that we need to monitor for, and the tools that the attackers use today are evolving really, really quickly. So it's challenging to monitor, I think.
Amazing. And yeah, for sure.
So as somebody working for a cloud vendor, where does your job end and the CISO or the DevSecOps team begins?
Excellent question. I'm not sure if all the cloud providers' policy is the same. I will speak for Google. We believe in something which is called shared fate. And what we try to do is we try to basically be with the customers in all stages of their usage. We believe that if the customer trusts the cloud and gets help with the cloud provider, they will have a better journey. And so this is a good question, because I think that those are very overlapped responsibilities, and I think that a lot of customers actually are not aware that they can call the cloud providers when they get hacked, and the cloud provider will really like to help with that, and we have resources. We have Mandiant, we have a lot of people. So I think it boils down to the relationship that you're building with the cloud provider, and then you can build a good process for your organization.
I can also add to that. I'm not working at Google or AWS, but it was discussed a lot about shared responsibility and shared fate, as you mentioned. It is the organization's responsibility for threat detection and protecting their environment. However, I see a lot of cases when the cloud infrastructure is the ones that notify the cloud that their credentials has been leaked, the database has been breached. And it kind of looks like organizations don't use enough the native tools that the cloud provides them. The native tools often have an edge because they have access to data and logs and services which us as security engineers often don't, or we simply won't enable those services because they cost way too much money. If we talked about networking logs in particular.
I think it's pretty cool. So one of the key examples we have, and we keep telling that story at Profero, is that one of the major incidents we've dealt with from one of the kittens, APTs, nation state, was that in one of the municipality vendors in Israel, there was a single usage of a single root key API for a single vendor. And it's basically, I know Israel is all about sharing and caring, but from the attacker's perspective, when we found out that was the root cause, we looked at it and said it might have been a dream for them. And once they discover that all of the infrastructure, everything is all managed by a single key. What can be other examples that can be the hottest present attacker can find when they get to some kind of an infrastructure, to some kind of a company, and discover that, whoa, this is what I wanted. This is the best gift I could get.
I think that the worst thing that could happen, the worst dream ever, is getting access to a security company. because then you, as a client, you trust your security vendor the most, and it's usually the organization that you would feel more comfortable granting them access to your environment and to the secret places and the sensitive data, because you want to classify the data, right? So you need to give them access to the content of the data. The problem is that once you get access to the security vendor, you get access to all of their customers, and unfortunately, we've seen that happen with Okta more than once.
I was wondering how many people in the crowd think about Okta when you said that. So
it probably happened to other security vendors as well that we are unaware of yet. They are unaware of yet. But it happens to other vendors as well. Who in this audience is not using Uber? Everyone is using it, and it happened to them as well. And if it happens to such large organizations that definitely have the budget for a security team and security tools, what does it mean about the small and medium businesses that their budget doesn't look like this? So I think that in terms of an attacker, if I were an attacker, I would definitely go after a security vendor, because everyone makes mistakes.
So, not assumingly, those things happen, and let's say a nation state or even some kind of a frequent attacker that came along some way, I don't know, drop out of a car, access to a multi-cloud security company, and I'm sitting there and I have all the crown jewels and I have access to the customer's environment, cloud infrastructure. Michael, maybe, what will be the things that you might have tried and do? What will be the things that we might try to defend against?
So first of all, when we're talking about multi-cloud cloud environments, they're usually the main cloud, which is the most secure, and all the teams are working and making sure that is our crown jewel and this is our main cloud. But the other clouds, so for example, if I'm working on AWS and I have GCP and Azure, they're kind of on the side, kind of in the middle, but everything is connected. There was a huge panel about NHI, so I won't go in there in too much details, but service accounts, access keys, everything is eventually connected. I saw an attack when an attacker gained access to a cloud. The first thing he did was create an access key called DevOps do not delete. So, and basically, it was... No, actually, he spun out a huge cluster, which the way it was detected is the machines didn't have the proper tags. So the DevOps team had basically CloudWatch alerts to look for any misconfiguration, the tagging. But he gained full access, and from there, he was able to access the entire organization. So not only the cloud infrastructure, but also the SaaS security tools and company laptops, everything. So I think this is the main issue when we're talking about clouds and high privileged access.
Now, a couple of lectures before, Ofer from Mythica spoke about it, and there were a couple of other panels. And I was thinking to myself, I'm an attacker. I reach this crazy environment. I mean, we're speaking about petabytes of data, gigabytes at least, hundreds of gigabytes. I got in there. How do I exfiltrate it? I mean, I knew what I used to do in on-prem environments. What would I do in this huge cloud? Do I use another cloud to transfer all this data? What do I do?
So I can give a couple of examples that we saw, and I'll definitely relate to the point about the service account. Definitely the first thing attackers do when they get access to any privileged environment is try and get ability to stay in. And so they generate service account keys. They try to generate service account or non-human identity keys that allow them to connect. When dealing with eventually with the damage, which is exfiltration a lot of the times, and by the way, we see a lot of double extortion type of scenarios where on one end I exfiltrate the data, or not I, but the bad guys. So we exfiltrate the data, and then the second thing is that they also try to extort the customer with the availability of we will delete your data as well. The way that you, and we see it a lot, is exfiltration is being done with using the native cloud services such as buckets, etc. If you will try, as an example, and access a different cloud service that you never accessed before, red lights, And also, if you try to do it, you will see a lot of egress traffic. So this is also dangerous. But if you're using the same service, so again, with Google, which obviously never happens, but with Google, let's say you can have access to some data lake, and you exfiltrate it to Google Drive. It's challenging to catch.
Again, everything theoretical, of course. It reminds me when there was one time when we've seen an attack, and it was one. Nope. Looks like I have not much luck today. So once upon a time, we have been investigating a pretty major breach, and we identified that I wouldn't say the root cause, but one of the main cause for the huge breach was a credential storing device. And we were very fascinated to see how the attacker grabbed all of those secrets. And one of the thing that amazed me was that instead of trying to break in when it was live, they actually exported a VM, took the VM offline, and came back actually a month and a half later, which was probably the time to brute force the root password. So it's kind of interesting to see how attackers are actually utilizing some of those. And the thing that was really interesting, and brings me to the next question, was that specific API, which was used to export, was something that, if you ask 99% of the DevOps, they didn't even know existed. And they say, hey, I can back up like that. So it brings me to the question on how much the organizations are lacking behind the knowledge of the attackers.
Yeah, I can answer that. So to go a little bit back, we see a lot of exfiltration attempts when we see a snapshot is being made and uploaded or copied into a bucket or simply another service. A lot of the time, us in the organization, we don't really know how many accounts we have and in which clouds. So basically, we can have GCP, Azure, and AWS. In best case scenario, we have tens of accounts. In worst case scenario, we have hundreds and thousands and multiple organizations. And a lot of time when we're dealing with security tools, we're looking into what is this alert and what is this account and who's the owner of this account, who's the owner of this account. So when there is an attacker that's using native cloud security tools and you see an upload of a snapshot into another account, as a security engineer, as an architect, as a DevOps, DevSecOps, it doesn't matter, you see another simple action that you see all the time in the cloud. And when we're looking into if we go back to the IOC world, what you see is an IP of another cloud vendor. If you see an IP of another cloud vendor, I suddenly hear myself. And you'll see another service and you see another region, and it's not really, yeah, I think it's, I need to position it properly. It's really hard to make the distinction between an innocent action and a malicious intent.
I think that we also see, when talking about, let's say, maturity, in organizations we see, ninja DevOps engineers who understand how the cloud works and how to utilize every feature and every widget. But these same features and widgets can be used for security as well. And they don't do this mental leap from doing it for cost optimization or for operational reasons to security, because they're DevOps engineers and they don't necessarily see security as part of their job. And on the other hand, the security team is so busy doing, managing the Google Drive permissions and new employee training and who has access to GitHub. So yeah, cloud infrastructure is also their responsibility, but they don't understand enough on how to use the Cost Explorer or to use tags in order to put security guardrails in place. So this is our job sometimes, to help them utilize and educate them on taking native security tools and native tools, not necessarily security tools, in improving their security posture in the cloud, even before you go ahead and buy a very expensive and fancy security tool.
Dima, you want to elaborate?
I would like to say maybe something funny about it, but attackers, they don't only learn the cloud and try to understand the cloud in order to attack it. They're actually cloud users. We need to be honest about this. A lot of times, attackers use the cloud for campaigns. They use it for their own operational, C2 infrastructure. And a lot of times, which is the funny part, they also make operational security errors such as not configuring MFA. Okay, so it happens.
I like to think about, and it worked for me in the past, is that we're trying really hard to learn from the innovation of attackers sometimes. And for example, one of the areas we've seen the attackers have become really good at is mapping the infrastructure of their victims or targets. And can anyone wants to elaborate what kind of tools they use and what can we learn from it for our advantage?
I can say really quickly maybe one thing, not about the tools themselves. Again, tools is something that's being developed all the time, but I think that enumeration, which is what you mentioned, enumeration with cloud services is a lot of times way easier. One, they're very well documented because you want to help developers develop stuff for cloud, so it's documented. And like a lot of panelists also said, it is the infrastructure of the internet. So everything has a DNS name, everything is resolvable. You can enumerate pretty easily cloud services. So I would say security by obscurity is not a good approach with cloud.
Yeah, so basically there are many tools available in GitHub that both attackers and defenders should use to map their environment. You need to understand how the world sees you in order to properly protect it, probably protect your organization from the internet exposure. And I don't remember the APT group, but there is a tool called Phantom AI, which is basically a tool that is run by ChatGPT that can assist you in enumerating the services and enumerating the applications that you use in your cloud and what type of misconfiguration or vulnerabilities they basically exist in those services. When you go into the mindset of the attacker, as I mentioned earlier, you need to understand how the attacker sees you, and then you can address it with the proper mitigation. If it's zero trust or well architected, or simply closing the services and ports that you don't really need and require. So when the attacker enumerates you and looking for something, the attack vectors or path will be much, much narrower.
So we've seen that, I guess every human being is like that, as the way we were raised and born. We kind of work in herds, and there's trends and everything, and everybody follows the biggest trend, and attackers are the same. And for example, in on-prem, the hottest trend this year is 0 days around network appliances. What will be the hottest trends attackers are using today in the cloud?
I would say one thing is that attackers, when we're looking at the cloud and the attackers, we all the time look at the cloud as the attack target. But also we need to look at the cloud as something the attackers leverage for their campaigns. I think that we see, and we definitely see a lot of research right now that is happening, and we see attackers trying to use it. Use stuff like AI, which they have very available, in the cloud. It's just API, you take it and you start developing. And around the usage of agency with like AI agents. And there is a research that says you can use a hierarchical agent structure, which is basically few AIs talking with each other to do a single task, in developing 0 days. So I think we will definitely see this. We already see AI in production used for phishing attacks, which are becoming way harder to detect. So I think those are kind of trends that we will see definitely in 2024 going forward.
Another trend that we're seeing, and it's no surprise, is the exploitation of identity and access management, which I think it's not necessarily unique to the cloud, but we definitely see that more. We've seen it, I don't know, has it been like, 7 years since the bank, Capital One, where the attacker was able to make a very simple query to an internet-facing instance and that was connected to the token service and was able to ask for a token, and it was game over at that time. So since then, not much has changed. People keep on making these mistakes, and since we have to use identity and access management in order to grant access, because we don't want to manage users and passwords for every webhook that we connect to our environment. This is the safest way to do it, of course. But the problem is that the cloud being so fast and so agile, many people are, of course, sometimes using their private laptops. So we see some credentials leakage. Sometimes we hard code credentials in GitHub and those bots. You don't need AI for that. You just have those scanners looking for a password, admin, administrator, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's not a problem. So we're still seeing that, unfortunately, and we will keep on seeing that for a very long time, I think. I don't want to say there is no cure, but we are humans, and we keep on repeating the same mistakes over and over again.
Yeah, I can also add to that. By the way, I completely agree, and it's a great point because we tend to jump on the next bandwagon and looking for the next big thing. Log4j, Spring4j, Summer4j, all of those 4Js, VZ, what was the latest one. But eventually, the attackers are looking for access keys in GitHub, as you mentioned, and they're looking for open services in the cloud. And the attack you mentioned with Capital One Bank, the SSRF, which is very, very basic misconfiguration, which AWS, by the way, addressed it only recently by default, changing the configuration in the cloud, is still being exploited by the masses. So instead of going to the next trend and patching the next vulnerability, go take a step back, go back to basics, look what's going on inside your organization, and start from scratch. Start from the identities, go into the open services, and patch the basic misconfiguration that we see all the time.
By the way, not GCP, of course, but other vendors
Of course.
who make changes to their default setup of different services exactly for these reasons, for the misconfigurations and the silly mistakes that people do. We still see data leaking out of S3 buckets, even though the default configuration was changed by AWS some years ago, maybe 7 or 8 years ago, for it not to be public. It used to be public by default. They made a very serious change to the entire UI of how you set up a new S3 bucket. It does not have internet access by default, and people still open it just for 5 minutes because they want to check something out, and then leave it open for the rest of the day, and that's it. Not GCP, other vendors.
AWS is next. Just saying.
No, I'm sure it happens to everyone. So we can go for almost every single booth in one of the startup pavilion. We can go to the big lectures tomorrow and some other lesser events than we have here in CSA. And there will be amazing innovations around cloud security, homomorphic encryption, a lot of things that AI security vendors, etc. But from attacker's perspective, one of the things that still works 100% is just no MFA on the user. What are the things that you think and you can see that organizations are putting a lot of investment on, where from attacker's perspective, it's just more simply an easy access by some kind of those very outdated misconfigurations and vulnerabilities?
I can say something that, I think we talk a lot about technology and solutions with like startups, etc. One of the things about the statistics in the first lecture was about how much an attack will cost less if there is education. I think is around that. I think it's very, very important to create a process. I think it's very important. A lot of those attacks happen because of siloed processes. Developers have access and they're not working in sync with security. I think it's important to create an inclusive environment where people are working together, security with development. I know it's a big challenge. I know it might sound challenging. But I think this is one of the biggest things we need to work on continuously, because business pushes, and the cloud, there is adoption in the cloud because business wants to use the cloud, and then security is kind of lagging behind. I think we need to work together and create a process together.
Michael, you said before that if we just control our outbound-facing instances or resources, it will at least make the attacker's life a little harder, or looking at it as layers, right? Protecting at the outer layer and then going in. So I think that many organizations, you can go and buy really fancy security tools, but if you don't control who has credentials, who by human or non-human identity, who has credentials, what valid credentials do I have in my environment right now? If you just control that and revoke unused credentials and make sure you're aware which vendor has a valid credential to your environment, and run some kind of a routine validation, and of course rotate those credentials every so often, this will also be not a very hard step to implement, but it will make a significant improvement and make the attacker's life a little harder as well.
Yeah, there are many fancy tools that we can buy. Right now, the hottest trend is probably cloud detection and response and detecting threat inside our cloud environment. But eventually, I think what the attackers are exploiting mostly is the lack of the knowledge the security engineers have in the cloud. You can buy a CSPM, you can buy a CWPP, you can buy any tool that you want, but if you don't have the knowledge on how to use it properly and how to make sure you deploy it fully in the organization. I see a lot of organizations that are buying the latest CSPM, but they only deploy it on one production account, but the other accounts, like, they don't matter, like they're not really connected. And the biggest issue is that security engineers are reactive. We are reactive to alerts, we're reactive to issues. We don't address the issues from the root cause. We need to go into the pipeline, we need to go into the basic configuration of the cloud, we need to go into the golden images instead of patching vulnerability, I love that word, misconfiguration and CVs we have in the cloud. So all of those tools doing a great job, and I think that also organizations need to rely on the knowledge and best practices that the tools are bringing, because it can narrow the gap that we as security engineers have in this field.
I would say, and maybe I can be a bit blunt, but when planning for budget for next year, of course invest in CSPM and similar products, but there's also a lot of emphasis on education. Some of those materials are free on CSA, so go ahead and log in. A lot of good people like Moshe have been worked on them. But I think education in the end of the day is something that it's going to take some time, and something that we've learned along the way to be a really good cloud security developer, cloud dev, SecOps dev, cloud, whatever. You need a lot of experience, a lot, 5, 6, I don't know, more years than the cloud can even be here. And then you need a lot of field expertise as well. And this is something that majority of organizations are lacking. And additionally, if we're speaking about the attacker's perspective, attackers are seeing much more environments, and they are seeing much more many different clouds. And I think this is one of the key reasons they've been so successful at reproducing. And I think to start wrapping up, I would like to ask each one of you, if possible, if each one of the persons here and our attendees, if you want them to live with something out of this panel, what would it be?
Sure. So I will start with one thing, and this goes, I think, way back to just general security practice. If we make security challenging for our users, they will bypass it. If we we harden the cloud, people will generate non-human identities, send it over Gmail to home, and run it from their TV. We need to build platforms or build an environment which is very easy to use for our developers and our users in order for them to use it securely and not look for bypasses to do their daily job.
Something very practical, all of you can go ahead and do today, even right now. You can open, after we finish, you can open the laptops and go ahead and do it right now. Go and look for every credential or key that was not used in the last 180 days. This is a lot. The average breach, I think, based on the IBM report, takes to detect today like 200 days or something. So it will be missed in theory. But go ahead and revoke those keys and see what happens. If nobody complains, you're good. And you can go ahead and revoke keys that were not used in the last 120 days. So this is a step all of you can do. I believe this is a tactic that was also used by Netflix in the past that turned out to be really good. And this way, you will only remain with a few keys that are in constant use. And the ones that are being rarely used, which are also very important, at the very least, make sure they're least privileged and they only have access to perform the specific actions they were intended to perform. They only have access to the specific resources you wanted them to have access to. And this is something you can do automatically, periodically. But for now, just do it once and see what happens.
I think that what the attacker are gaining a big advantage because they spend time in learning and researching and looking into cloud and cloud services and cloud providers and how everything works. The security engineers need to stop their day-to-day activity for at least 5-10 minutes, leave the tickets alone, leave the alerts alone, and read an article by the vendors themselves, read a blog, try something new inside your cloud. And even if you're maybe a bigger organization, you can approach the cloud, and correct me if I'm wrong, and you can get a lot of knowledge, and you can even get training inside your organization, gain the knowledge that you need to properly protect your cloud.
Amazing, thank you. I would end with a strategy that we like using, and that's looking, in cloud it's pretty easy to see how much we spend, at least in the larger buckets. So I call it prioritize by budgeting, and you can see how much you spend on certain features. The features you spend on the most, try and do proper security to them. So first of all, thank you for joining this panel. And thanks for staying. And anybody has any questions for the experts here in the crew? Yes. Do we have time for questions?
Get me a mic? Yeah, we have time.
Hopefully, if it's working.
I think this is the last one.
We tried out on the batteries.
Oh, so it's me. It's not.
The attacker's expert. This is the on button. So who had a question? Give a second. Who was the first one for you?
Today, this whole morning, it seems a common subject is IAM. How do you see the future in biometric authentication as a solution for that?
One of the biggest troubles, correct me if I got it right, is IAM and identity management. How do you see biometric security solving that?
First of all, today, I'm not seeing a lot of usage of biometric solutions in the cloud. Maybe in like highly secured facilities, maybe in the electricity industry or nuclear weapons, I don't know. But for SaaS companies that build in the cloud, it's so hard to implement MFA on your phone. So I don't see a lot of usage of biometric authentication, but maybe you see something different, a different trend?
I would say something different. Eventually, biometric authentication is like another factor, which is very strong. And this goes to initial authentication. A lot of the attacks that we are seeing are due to session thieving, stuff like that. So after somebody did the initial authentication, we can steal the session and use it. What I think we should be trying to implement, and there is a lot of technology around it, is short-lived authentication, tokenizing, federating. I know that federation has been said in the perspective of it's good for hackers, but try to federate services. Things of this nature, I think, would be very good for this problem.
And as we role-playing the attacker's perspective, I would love to see a large amount of databases of biometric data that we can grab and utilize. So I'm not sure many employees, especially in Europe, Israel as well, will be happy to give their biometric data to many companies for authentication. Any other questions?
Yes. Hello. Hi, everyone. Thank you for the wonderful discussion on the attacker's point of view. My question is like Shira and Mikhail has discussed about the security vendor. And the example was given was of Okta. So just my question is simple, like the Okta incidents of security vendor happened. So how we can mitigate, what are the means we can add up to mitigate not to happen in near future? Thank you.
So just let me repeat. In case of a security vendor breach, how can we mitigate against cases like Okta?
Yeah.
So there are probably different strategies around this. Since we talked about credentials before, first of all, let's go back to making sure that even when you use a vendor and you trust it, how about if you only grant them with a specific access that they need so that you can control the blast radius? Even if in theory something bad is about to happen, they will not compromise the entire environment. Now, once it did happen, even when talking about the Okta incident that actually affected very large companies like Cloudflare. Cloudflare, it always happens in the weekend, of course. So over the weekend, they rotated, I think, thousands of keys and service accounts. So this is the right thing to do as a immediate response kind of incident. And at the same time, you would need another team checking what else did the attacker do. And this also relates to what we heard in the previous session, talking about logs. If you will not have the logs, it will be impossible to know and understand the real damage that occurred in your environment. You might have access to some of it, you might be completely blind, and you will have to rebuild your entire infrastructure.
So thanks again, and if there's more questions, our team will be here answering whatever you might have in mind from the attacker's perspective. So thank you.